Hello there guys, what is going on? Son of Chelsea back here again for another episode of Added Time, answering your questions that you kindly submitted for today's show. But before we get into any of that, I want to ask you guys, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also hit the like button if you're enjoying the content because it helps out the channel as well. Got a busy week coming up on the channel. Got of course the Krasnodar game, so I'll be doing my rational perspective after that game on Wednesday, and of course Team Selector will be out tomorrow. I've got a great guest hopefully on the channel this week for you guys to enjoy. A great discussion, I'm sure, and of course build up to the weekend's game against Burnley. So a lot of content this week, so make sure don't miss any of it. Hit the subscribe button, notification bell, like button, share it, all that good stuff. But let's get into your questions. Firstly here from Calvin, who asks, do you think with the 3-4-3 system we can get the best out of Timo Werner? I think it's an interesting point, and I think it's a very relevant one, of course, after Saturday's game against United. Frank going to the 3-4-3 for the first time this season. We have to see what he does against Krasnodar and then again against Burnley. I feel like if he goes for the 3-4-3 again on Wednesday, then I think we can start to feel, oh, okay, this may actually be the direction he's heading in. I don't think it is. I still sort of lean in the direction. I think that it was one game against United. He played that system very well against them in the FA Cup semi-final. So I think that was just for one game. But in terms of Timo, of course, he did play in that system sort of again with Leipzig last season. And it's sort of feeling at the moment that frustration of getting Timo into the best positions, especially when we're struggling to create great opportunities for him, getting him in behind the opposing defence, and sort of thinking if you could pair him up with someone. So say a 3-4-3, maybe a 3-5-2 could work. I mean, this has been touted before of having, say, Olivier Giroud or Tammy Abraham for sort of Timo to work off, because that's what he did at Leipzig with Poulsen, and that really helped him sort of make runs off. But I think the thing is with that, and the trouble for Lampard is you have to sacrifice one of the wide players, probably even maybe two of the wide players, so Christian Pulisic and Hakim Ziyech, and you don't want to do that, do you? So the 3-4-3, I think it's not that big of an issue at the moment. I think 4-2-3-1 will likely be the main formation. I think we'll have to wait and see. I think it's also about Chelsea being more intelligent of getting the ball through to our attackers. I think that's the issue we're facing at the moment. It feels like we lack ideas in central midfield when the team presses our pivot, basically, of Kante and Georgie, like United did on Saturday. So that's the issue for Lampard in terms of fluidity and getting the ball up to him in the right positions, because Timo, as we've discussed before, is not your usual Chelsea striker. You have to get him in the right areas. He's not going to be someone that can take a long ball off the chest back to goal and sort of link up play. You have to get the ball into his feet. You have to get the ball from him running into goal. And let's hope we can see that a bit more. But I don't know if the 3-4-3 system will be a long-term one for Lampard, because I still think he'll go to the 4-2-3-1 again. At the Bridge Pod asks, and this is very much linked to the last question, should Lampard play Tammy against Burnley due to their soak-up pressure style and then bring Timo on when legs start to tire in the second half? I understand against a low-block type team that, of course, Burnley we expect will do next Saturday, because that's sort of their game under Sean Dyche. And sort of seeing how the game would unfold and how Chelsea will likely have a lot of possession. I guess the sort of the counterpoint to that, I remember when we went to Burnley last year and Christian Pulisic got in behind them a couple of times, we were able to break on them quite quickly. So just because the team sets up in a low block, if they're poor in possession, if they give the ball away in dangerous areas, you can create space. But if they're really rigid and set up well, which you expect Burnley to be, it's about getting the ball to the wide players, using the width of the pitch. So you look at the likes of Ben Chilwell, of Christian Pulisic, of Reece James, especially on that right, and whoever's playing on that right, whether it's Ziyech or Callum Hudson-Odoi, or recently, of course, Mason Mount too. And then you're sort of wondering how Chelsea can get the ball into Werner. And you think if it's going to be that game where they're sitting very deep, having a Giroud or Tammy, as you mentioned, may be a better option. I still think you should be playing Timo Werner, because I think that's the first choice option. And I think there are ways you can get around it. And I think Timo's a good enough player, even in tight spaces, because I think when we saw the low block against Crystal Palace, you got to remember Timo Werner was out wide in that game. He wasn't in a central position. I still think that's his best position, central, in a central role. I want to see him up against a low block in a central role, because I think if Chelsea are more smart to get him into the right areas, he's still a dangerous player. I think he's got the intelligence, movement to find space even in congested areas. I think that's what makes him such a deadly striker. So it's not the case that you have to be playing against sort of a team that sits high or has a high line or a high press to get behind them. I think think I'd like to see Timo against Burnley as well, because I think he could still find space to score goals, in my opinion. Tarrant asks, what are your opinions on our new signing so far? It's sort of hard at the moment. The season is still very early on. I think this is what people are forgetting, how, because we started the league sort of a month later, and sort of now the nights are drawing in England, and you feel like, it's getting close to winter. It naturally feels like we're further into the season than we actually are. I mean, in normal circumstances, this would be sort of early to mid-September at the moment. So in terms of judgment on the new players, I think that there's been bright moments from nearly all of them, to be honest. I think Ben Chilwell for me is the standout player at the moment in terms of consistent good performances. He settled right into playing at Chelsea. He's giving us everything we needed, and I've been really impressed with his defensive displays as much as his offensive play, because that was the concern with Chilwell, of being that player coming in and not really adding that defensive solidity that we'd want. But I think in the recent games, he's shown that he has got that balance to his game, which is great in that position. So I'd say Chilwell for me is top of the list. I think just behind that, I think that I would maybe put Mendy or Silva, but both of those players, especially Mendy's just arrived at the club, and I just don't want to be influenced by recent performances, although they've been really positive. I think Timo getting some goals early on in his Chelsea career, I think is good. I think Kai's at brief moments shown good. I think Kai's probably had the most difficulty, but then you're looking at Ziyech, who's barely played, so it's hard to make a judgment on Ziyech. I think all of them have had bright moments. I think it's just about Frank now nailing down sort of his best sort of attacking system. I think I have belief in the defensive players that they're really settled now. I think Mendy, Silva, Chilwell, I think they all look very settled now at Chelsea. I think they'll be playing a lot of games now consistently together, and I think that's good. I just think it's for Lampard to figure out what is his attacking lineup going to look like. Is it a 4-2-3-1? Is it going to be some form of, say, Pulisic, Havertz, Ziyech and Werner up top? And I think hopefully, a bit like the defence, those players playing together consistently will help build that chemistry over time. I think a lack of pre-season has really halted Lampard's sort of ability to gel these players, which are quite a few of them, together very quickly. So hopefully now, with a lot more games coming, we'll see that a lot more. But I think that all of them have showed bright moments. I don't think any of them you could say have really struggled. I think you need to give them patience and time this season. Gabe asks, what are your thoughts on Michy? I think he's a top-class player and we've just severely misused him. There's no reason he should be good for Belgium, Borussia Dortmund, Palace, but not us. I disagree. I really do. I think that, yes, he's looked encouraging on the loan spells to those clubs, but I just don't think he suited Chelsea. I think he's got enough opportunities now to prove himself at Chelsea. I think the issue with Michy is he's not, I think, good enough to play for Chelsea, number one, because I think he's shown several times now when a manager like Lampard has put faith in him in big games like the Man United game, he clearly lacks sort of the discipline or structure to follow instructions. I think at times that's been a consistent issue that coaches, and it's been reported that coaches have been frustrated by Michy. Also, his hold-up and link-up play just simply isn't good enough. I mean, it's not as good as Tammy Abraham. It's clearly not as good as Olivier Giroud. That's why he's never sort of flourished in Chelsea's first team. He's a good sort of player in the box, box poacher. He's a classic striker in that sense. But for me, as a Chelsea striker, you need to offer so much more than that. Your movement has to be much more intelligent, especially when you're playing against teams that aren't just going to give you bags of space. Especially a team like Chelsea, most teams we face are going to be looking at our forwards, going to be mostly sitting in a low block and going to try and frustrate us in our attacking play. I don't think he's ever proved to me he's good enough to excel at that level. Borussia Dortmund or Palace especially, I think maybe he gets more space and maybe excels in those systems. Maybe he's just never been suited to the Premier League or Chelsea. That happens with some players. I think it's harsh to say he's been misused by the club, because I think he's got opportunities. I think he was a little bit unlucky at the start of his Chelsea career that both Diego Costa and then Morata were brought in, and he was never getting in front of Diego when he first arrived. He just wasn't, and he shouldn't have been getting in front of Diego Costa, because Diego was such a brilliant striker for Chelsea, and that was an issue for him. But he was given opportunities, I think, at times, and especially last season under Lampard, until Giroud was given a chance, I think Michy had more than enough opportunity to prove himself, and he didn't. And I think that's why he's left the club now. And I think even though it's on loan, he won't be playing for Chelsea again. So I think he'll be leaving permanently. But no, I think that's harsh. I think there were some nice moments for Michy, but never for me good enough all round to prove himself as capable of being a main Chelsea striker that you could trust week in, week week out. And finally, Daniel Sinclair asks, is the Premier League title this year up for grabs? With no title contenders such as Liverpool or City having great starts, could teams like us, United and Spurs, have a chance this year? Yeah, I mean, it's so unpredictable at the moment in the Premier League. Everyone is dropping points. Everton and Aston Villa losing this weekend. Man City dropping points once again. Arsenal losing last night. I know Tottenham are playing tonight, but Liverpool just barely winning the other day. It's so hard to know. And I think in terms of Chelsea, it's why you shouldn't be going overboard on results at the moment, because when you actually look at the Premier League table, it's so unpredictable. No one's consistent, and there's an opportunity for Chelsea. If we put at the moment like 2 to 3 wins together, it's really going to shoot you up the table. And I think it's a very cliched term, but waiting for Christmas to look at the Premier League table properly, I think has never been more relevant than this season, because it does look, it's going to be, at least for the early periods of the season, that type of year where no team can put, say, 3 to 4 wins together, at least at the moment, because teams are struggling with consistency, with chemistry, with injuries like Liverpool have, losing Virgil van Dijk. It's a weird season, which means there could be a surprise Premier League winner, and maybe that could be Chelsea. If it clicks, I think Chelsea have got a really good opportunity this season, but we'll have to wait and see, because it is so topsy-turvy. And I think for Chelsea at the moment, it's just about going game to game. I know that's very cliched footballer term, but I think it's just about getting that consistency and clicking for Chelsea, and then seeing where we are at Christmas time, and then we can judge if we're in a title race, if there's an opportunity there, and then go from there, basically. But that is it for this episode of Added Time. Thank you guys so much for submitting your questions for today's episode. If you did enjoy the video, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Also, rate and review if listening on the podcast. Follow me on Twitter @SonofChelsea, and I'll see you again.